My name is Imani Oakley. I am a New Jersey native, born and raised in Montclair, New Jersey. I have worked in politics in New Jersey on every single level. I've worked on the federal level, I've worked on the state level, I've worked on the grassroots level, and throughout all of that time I've been a political organizer in the progressive space. So New Jersey has the most corrupt ballot design in the entire country, and that's not hyperbole. We literally are the only state in the country that has a ballot that looks like this. And what it essentially is it's a long column of names that are chosen by the political establishment, the Democratic establishment or the Republican establishment, but for our purposes and the progressive purposes, I like to talk about the Democratic side. And they choose a long line of names. Now, what this long column does, is when an average voter goes in and looks at this ballot, they look straight at that column because obviously it's a straight name of Democrats and they want to be a good Democrat, so they're like, oh, okay, I'll vote down this line. And typically the line has like a really famous person at the top, so it'll be like Cory Booker or Joe Biden, for example, and people will be like, oh, okay, well, this is where the serious Democrats are. I want to be a good Democrat. I'm going to vote right down this line. But the problem is that typically progressives are placed all over the ballot in random spots, even if they are a very good and viable candidate. A perfect example of this was this last election in 2020, where Joe Biden was given the line. He was in that long column of names, and Bernie Sanders was off to the side somewhere randomly by himself in one little square. And the thing is, if you wanted to vote for Bernie, that became very confusing. I actually, talked to some older voters who looked at that and said, well, I want to vote for like Cory, and I want to vote for my congressperson, and I want to vote for whoever else, my councilman, whoever else. But I also want to vote for Bernie. That's who my vote is for. Can I vote in both places? And so it really confuses people. So if they don't have somebody to talk to about what they can and can't do in that situation, a lot of times they might just vote in both places, or just like say, okay, well, it looks like I can't vote for Bernie, so I just got to vote in this line if I want to vote for all my other representatives, right? And so what this actually ends up having is an effect where people who are placed on the line are at an automatic 35% advantage just by being placed there. Just by being placed there. They don't even have to campaign. They don't have to talk to voters. They don't have to do any of that. No ads on TV, nothing. They literally are just placed on that line, and because of the psychological effect it has on voters, they have an automatic 35% advantage. I support changing it for both because it's a matter of good democracy also, right? Like during the primaries, it grossly disadvantages progressives, and that's really been the bulk of my focus because we have Democrats who are basically what they call Dinos, Democrat in name only, and they vote, the way basically Republicans in other states vote. But again, it's a matter of good democracy. It's a matter of good ballot design. And what a good ballot would look like, it's called a bubble ballot. And what that looks like is you have the title in like one square, like it's like typically a light gray square. And then right under that are all of the names running for that position in the same box. So you'll have a Democrat running there, whoever's running for that position, you'll have the Republican, you'll have the Independent, etc., not during the primaries. And then during the primaries, you'll just have all the candidates who are running for the same party for that position. And that is considered a much better ballot because it's a lot more fair. And now that even still has some issues. For example, the person who's first sometimes has a little bit of an advantage. But what some states do is they rotate it. So for example, in one county, one person might have the top one, and they rotate it. The next county, another name will be at the top. So it's just much more fair. And that's what we need. We need a fair democracy. Now, again, my main focus is getting progressives in because I believe that what we need in New Jersey is a real progressive blowout. We need some wins. But again, a matter of good democracy, I think we should switch to bubble ballots the way other states do it and have that rotating system so it's good for democracy all around. Absolutely not. New Jersey has been a solidly blue state for a long time. There are a bunch of people who have that D next to their name. And frankly, if the Democrats actually campaign well, they're not going to lose. They're not going to lose. Plus, we also have an influx of folks coming from New York, which is probably like deeper blue, the city, than New Jersey. We have an influx of those folks because New York has gotten extremely expensive now moving into the state. So I think it actually gives Democrats even more of an advantage because because you have those folks coming in. So I actually don't think, I think that's a myth that Democrats like to say, who are establishment, in order to scare people away from getting rid of this highly undemocratic process known as the line. But we should definitely get rid of it, and I don't think in any way, shape, or form would we be at threat of losing to Republicans. So, you know, those organizations like unions and you know, the C4s and things like that endorse those candidates on the line, they do it because they have to. In New Jersey, we have a very interesting system where, you know, you will be punished in some way, shape, or form if you do not endorse the candidates on the line. And the reason that works is because it's pretty much a guarantee that if you are placed on that line, you're going to win. And so if a union or a C4 or any organization that will need an elected official to get through their initiatives, if they want any chance of being able to talk to that person, of having that person's ear in any way, shape, or form, they have to endorse them because they're going to win. And that, again, that's not democracy. These organizations and their members should be able to look and see who the best candidate is running and not be so afraid to endorse whoever they want simply because the game is rigged and it's always going to be one person who gets the win. Again, that's not democracy. That sounds like a fiefdom or something. Like that's not the way things should work at all. I think what's more happening there is that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, that they had the line once, and then once they got it and they won, they did a good job of making their name known in the area. So then once they were kicked off, you know, they still were able to get those votes. Another example of that is Nia Gill. At one point, she wasn't listening to the party, and they kicked her off the line, and she still won because she did a good job of getting her name recognition and everything in her area. But again, they should not have that much power. That's really what this comes down to. There should not be this small group of typically white and typically male, typically rich folks who can say, oh, you can automatically win this race. This time we're going to take away your chance. Best of luck to you. They should not have that power. That power should be in the hands of everyday voters. And by the way, those folks winning off the line is like once in a blue moon. It's literally like once every 6 to 10 years, right? And that's not nearly enough. To compare that to a similarly situated state, New York, for example, you have incumbents winning, like maybe, I believe it's something like within a decade, there were 22 challengers who beat incumbents. It's something like that number. Whereas in New Jersey,
legislature.
I'm sorry?
Was that for all public positions or just the legislature?
I actually believe it's the legislature. I don't think it's all public position. I believe it's the legislature. And you have so much more wins, whereas in New Jersey, within a decade, you'll have maybe 3 people who win off the line, right? So that demonstrates how powerful this thing is, where pretty much if you're a challenger, you basically have no chance unless you previously enjoyed the line, got in there, did a decent job, people liked you enough, and then you have just enough name recognition to win again. But other than that, you know, you really do not have a chance. And the real, again, back to the core of the issue is that this small group of mostly white, rich men should not have the power to just decide for the public who they want to represent. So a couple of things about that. One, again, so to put the 35% advantage into perspective, think about in other states. In other states, if you beat somebody by 35%, like you wash them. Like they did a terrible job. They were just a terrible candidate. No one liked them. Like you really stomped them into the ground. In New Jersey, if you are an incumbent or you are endorsed by the establishment and the machine, you get that automatic 35%. You don't even have to do anything. You're simply placed in a certain part on the ballot, and all of a sudden you have that automatic 35% advantage. Progressives who are challenging are at an extreme disadvantage. Just starting off, they're already starting. In most states, you're starting 0-0. It's even. That's where you start. In New Jersey, you're starting at a 35% disadvantage. The challenger, who's a progressive, is down here, and the incumbent is already up here. So when you're calculating a win number, actually in New Jersey, typically you count that win number again as if you were starting from 0% and your opponent is starting from 0%. In New Jersey, you have to calculate a win number and also account for that extra 35%. So you actually have to win more votes in New Jersey if you're a challenger and a progressive than you would in any other state. Additionally, the other thing that comes with getting the line is also comes with the money as well as the connections that the machine will give. So when you're given the line, you're given email lists, you're given a certain amount of money by the party, you're given what I'll call in this case lackeys by the party who come and will like run your campaign for you. You're given all of that stuff, where progressives have to build that up, which means they have to build up the money, they have to build up the ground game. It's just an overwhelmingly amount of stuff that a progressive challenger would have to build up in order to win, in comparison to somebody who basically, once you're placed on the line, you're made, essentially. And so I don't think it's really so much an issue of progressives not running good races. I think it's an issue of how much and how powerful the line is and how much it gives you as an advantage by the party. So there are 3 different ways that we can get rid of the line, and I'll do them in order of, least great to what I think is the greatest. Least great is that someone in the legislature could, grow a spine and say, I'm going to introduce a piece of legislation, a bill that will abolish the line. And they can push for it, they can fight for it, they'll have all the backing of all the progressive organizations, and they'll probably make a name for themselves too, push for it, back it, and then get it passed through, both chambers as well as signed by the governor. And then once that happens, we'll have no more line, right? That's one way. Cold day in hell, that will happen. You have basically everybody in legislature benefits from the line. And then also, a lot of the ways that the party bosses get to them is they're like, oh, you want to rise at a point. At some point, you want to go from being in this legislature to being in Congress, or you want to go and you want to vote, you want to run for Senate, or you want to run for governor. So you need to listen to what I say, or otherwise it's never going to happen for you. So a lot of people are afraid to even take that chance because really they have ambitions that they don't want to be squandered by them taking this chance on actually fighting for good democracy. The other way that it can be done is through a lawsuit. Now, right now, there are a few organizations that are funding a lawsuit that's being brought by certain candidates who ran off the line, who are making the argument in court that the line is unconstitutional. The argument being that it violates the First Amendment right of free association. Now, why does it violate the right of free association? Well, the First Amendment says you have the right to freely associate, but that also implies that you have the right to not associate with someone. Now, in order to get prime placement on the ballot, not only do you have to get the party's blessing, but you also have to have other people running with you. You essentially have to build out a team. Again, another thing that just creates an additional hurdle for folks. Because if you're just a community activist, community organizer, you're just somebody who's like very involved in your community, you care about your community, you got to find a whole team of people who have that same drive and that same passion as you do if you want to get prime placement or anywhere at least close to prime placement on the ballot, right? And what the argument in these court cases is saying is that that's unconstitutional because you have the right to not be punished for choosing not to associate with others when you run for office. And so the other way is that the courts can decide that this entire system is unconstitutional, we got to get rid of it, it's illegal. So that's the second way. I think that way is a little bit better, but it's also something that takes a long amount of time. Court cases can take years, sometimes decades. So I like that a little bit better than begging the legislature to do it, but I also think that that could take considerably more time. The third way to do it, which I actually think is the best because I believe that going through the community is always the best way to do it, is to really get out the voter education and the political education on the ballot line. Right now, it's the best kept secret in New Jersey politics. You do not understand or know about the ballot line unless you work in politics in some form or fashion in New Jersey. The average voter has no idea this is happening. Again, the average voter looks at this thing and says, oh, okay, I'm going to be a good Democrat. I'm going to vote down this row. They have no idea that actually our ballot design is very, very corrupt. But the interesting thing is, once you explain the ballot line to other people, again, I gave that example earlier in our talk about people who wanted to vote for Bernie and also wanted to vote for Booker and their congressman. Once you explain to them the ballot line and why it's messed up, people are very against it, and they become very upset because they feel as though, you know, it's one of those forms of voter suppression, and they want a good democracy. So to me, the best way is to get out the voter education about this and really, really, really push in communities to push this as a form of political learning, so that when folks go and they vote, they already have the strength of the knowledge that this ballot line is corrupt, and they have to vote a different way and try and kind of figure out a better way to vote. So definitely grassroots organizations. Grassroots organizations, even unions possibly, if they're tired of, you know, always going with the machine, they have membership that they can teach these things. They can go out into the communities, community centers, even in schools. You know, if teachers want to take on the job, any civics teachers, any history teachers, any teacher who does that, to teach their students about it. So when they do become voters, they're already armed with this knowledge. So that's what the kind of places that I think it will come from. You know, grassroots orgs, teachers, the education system, as well as possibly unions if they go and do this education for their members. Well, I stick to the progressive sphere because, again, like, my aim here is not to get more conservatives into office. I think that's not it at all. Our Democrats are conservative enough. I don't want anybody to the right of them getting in. So I mostly focus on how this issue affects progressives, because I think the progressive policy initiatives and the policy pushes are going to be best for the people of New Jersey. However, if somebody did want to kind of expand the crowd that they're talking to, I think it's just a matter of good democracy. We've all grown up being taught in schools, being taught in our households, being taught by the news, that we live in a country that has a strong and real democracy. But here, you're having rich, typically old, white men choose who's going to represent you. And I think that's going to make anybody mad. I think that's going to make anybody mad because their choice is being taken away. Their vote is being taken away. Their voices are being taken away. And I think that will really resonate with anybody. Yeah, so a couple of things. I think the comparison to a more diversified police force makes complete sense, in that it doesn't matter what the skin color is if the system is still broken. It's the system of policing. When you're talking about policing, you're talking about a system of laws that are supremely broken, a system of which neighborhoods are patrolled more that's supremely broken. It's a similar thing with the line. The system of the ballot line is broken. And it really doesn't matter, what genitals somebody has, because, we have women who are also county chairs now. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. That system is broken. It doesn't matter who's there. So you got to get rid of it. Number one. Number two, in New Jersey machine does a very, very good job of putting people in these diversity positions. But what they do is they pick people who they know are going to be what they call loyal, which essentially means they'll do whatever they say. You have, for example, George Norcross, who has never held an elected position in his entire life, but he runs the entire South Jersey machine. He's a billionaire, old white guy, runs the South Jersey machine, and even the black and brown electeds are beholden to him and will not go against him, because then he'll punish them by wielding his money in a certain way to essentially ruin their lives, and also uses connections, his political connections, to ruin their lives. So even though you get these kind of diversity picks, one, the system is broken. So it really doesn't matter. You got to get rid of the system. It doesn't matter. They could be an alien from Mars. It doesn't matter. That system is still broken and it needs to be removed. But number two, you also have to follow the power, the true power, because sometimes there's someone in a position, but they are beholden to somebody else. Joe D is actually considered the boss of the North and this area, actually. So even though Leroy has that chairmanship, Joe D is considered like the main boss of this area. And that happens all over New Jersey, where you get these diversity picks who at the end of the day, either out of fear or, whatever it is, I really don't know, because I don't understand the logic behind it, will go with the system so as to not upset whoever the old white rich male party boss is. If you want to learn a little bit more about the ballot line, New Jersey Policy Perspective on their website has a whole study on it. It's very, very excellent. That study was done by a Princeton professor, and it shows all the ways in which progressives are broken down. Really, all folks are kind of broken down if they're challenging the line. And then the other thing is that I would say is you can also check out, I actually have a show other than this one called Upfront Now, where I've done a few episodes on the line. So if you're not into really reading studies so much, but you want to kind of get a quick primer on that, I have a few videos that you can go check out, and it'll teach you everything you need to know about the line, because we need to get the word out about this as much as possible.